What's up, YouTube? It's your girl, Crystal, and I am back with another review. Today, I'm going to be throwing it all the way back to 1992 and reviewing my favorite movie of all times, The Bodyguard. Now, The Bodyguard was released November 25th in 1992. I was just a little one. I was only 6 years old, but it's still my favorite movie, even though I was really little when it came out. So this movie, it stars Whitney Houston, the voice, of course, as Rachel Marin, a superstar R&B singer. It stars Kevin Costner as the bodyguard, who plays Frank Farmer. It stars Michelle Richards, who plays Whitney's sister in the film, Nikki Marin, and, we'll get to her later. Bill Cobbs, who plays Devaney, which is Rachel's manager, and then a whole other people, but, I don't know their names. So I want to start off with some facts before I get into why it's my favorite movie and to read Miss Nikki, honey. So the Bodyguard budget, which I just found out during my research, was only $25 million. I feel like when you watch this movie, it has a way bigger budget. It feels bigger than $25 million. I feel like it's $100 million movie. And I know that was back in the 90s, so $25 million back then was probably equivalent to $100 million now. But it just seems so much bigger, especially with it starring Whitney. I know her rate was not cheap. The music, the locations, all of those things, it just seemed like a bigger budget. But it was only $25 million, but it made 411 million. So it was a huge hit. The studio got all its money back, plus triple, quadruple, 1,000 triple times over. So it was a huge success, no matter the critique of some of the acting or the story and things like that. Also, we cannot forget about the iconic soundtrack. I want soundtracks to be made great again. I really do. The last real soundtrack, I feel like it was maybe the first Black Panther. That was the last dope soundtrack. But back in the 90s, we had so many iconic soundtracks, and they did involve Whitney. This was the best-selling soundtrack of all times. It made $34 million, and it included the iconic I Will Always Love You cover of Dolly Parton's 1974 song of I Will Always Love You. Now, I'm not going to lie, and y'all can laugh at me if you want to. When this first came out and through the years, I did not know I Will Always Love You was a cover. I'm sorry, y'all, I didn't. And then later on when I grew up and did, watch music videos and things like that, they're like, that's a cover. And I'm like, really? Because Whitney, I felt like, made it her own. Like, she changed the melody. It was just dope. Like, Dolly Parton even says to this day, like, that's the best thing that ever happened to her. And if you want to call it Whitney song, you can, but she's still getting them royalties. Hello. But I Will Always Love You, for me, will always be Whitney's song. Sorry to Dolly. It's a beautiful song, but it's Whitney's. She made it what it is. And every singer that ever wants to be on The Voice or American Idol or anything, they always try to sing that song and fail. But it's just one of those songs. I think it was voted like best love song or something like that. It was just beautiful. And Whitney made it her own. And that video, iconic. So let's start off with the movie, right? So the movie is, the tagline is, okay, best-selling pop diva Rachel Marin has a stalker whose obsession has risen to the level of a disturbing threat. At the urging of her manager, Rachel hires former Secret Service agent Frank Farmer as her bodyguard. Initially resented and disdained for his hard-nosed security procedures, Farmer soon becomes an integral part of Rachel's inner circle. As they spend time together, client and protector, they become closer still. Yeah, I got a little bit different tagline. I say, an R&B superstar who's insecure and scared lashes out at a new hire for doing his job while her sister has been hating on her since she was a little baby. And all wells that ends well, and they fall in love. Does that sound better, YouTube? No? Okay, forget y'all then. That's my tagline. Okay, so let's start with the first act, right? So we meet Frank Farmer. The film opens with Frank, and he shoots somebody. And we're like, okay, what's going on? You know, we find out, of course, he's a bad guy, right? So we find out that Frank is a former Secret Service agent. And he's toasting to this other gentleman, and I think he's kind of retired, like he's out of the business type of thing. So he's like chilling back at his house, and he's listening to country music, and he's got his Ray-Bans on, and he's just chilling in his backyard. So next thing we know, Devaney comes over his house, and he's like, yeah, I have they're in the middle of a conversation. It just picks up kind of in the middle. And he's like, you know, I have this Rachel, she's been going through this thing. We really need your help. What can you do? And he offered him, I believe it's $3,000. He was like, how much? I think it was $3,000 a week. So he's like, that's not enough. And when you think about it, it ain't. So Devaney's like, well, he was like, have you checked out Portman? You know, he was later in the film. Have you checked out some other people? He was like, well, I heard you were the best. He was like, you know, I am, you know, being humble, but also like, I am. And so he's just really, you know, he was like, she's really scared. She has a son, just really pitching her. And he was like, okay, if I take this gig, it's gonna be $5,000 a week. Now I did my math, y'all, because I work in finance. So 5,000 for 52 weeks, let's do the math. I think it's 226 a year, but let's just see. So we got 5,000, 52 weeks. Yeah, that's 260 a year, 260K. I think that's good. So he was like, ooh, if I got to pay you that, you must be deadly. And he was like, stand back and I'll show you. So he has like these knives, and he does this little thing where he's throwing them against the tree. The first two knives went elsewhere. He almost kills Devaney with the second one. He's like, okay, maybe I shouldn't pay this guy. Like Devaney looks like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. Like he almost dropped that thing on me. But then he gets his groove because he's a little rusty, you know. He gets his groove and he knocks them all three in the tree, and they're, you know, he shows that he's a killer, whatever. So the next thing we see is that Frank goes up to the house. So the first thing he sees is that their intercom at this multi-million-dollar house is raggedy. It ain't even a ring light. It's not a ring camera. It's nothing of the sort that we have now. It's just some old janky thing. And he tests the staff and the crew and everybody knowledge of security. So he ends up changing his name like 3 times. He becomes Tom, I think it's Tom Edison, Henry Ford, I think it was somebody else. Like he does all of this and nobody asks any questions. This white man just comes into the house and no one, I think Rachel's mom answers the door one time. Her other guy, her driver is just like, and you are? He was like, oh, Henry Ford. He was like, okay, you can go in. It's like, what? So he automatically sees issues like, oh, this is why this woman is being stalked, because no one here cares, right? Everybody's just living off the high hog and not caring about this woman's safety. Typical. So he meets Frank, he goes in, and Rachel is rehearsing like a video performance of Queen of the Night. That's my favorite song, by the way, on the album, on the soundtrack. And she's rehearsing, and then they try to call her over like, hey, Frank Farmer's here, your new bodyguard. And so she's being flippant, she's being a jerk, whatever. But I think it's all out of fear and the unknown, right? When we are fearful and we don't know someone that's coming into our circle, we're like, I think I'm good. I think I'm good. But this is also, I think, her attitude, because no one told her the truth as of yet, how much her safety was in jeopardy. She just thinks it's like, oh, I got a little stalker here and there that's sending me letters. But little did you know that this stalker was in your house and he placed a letter on your bed. Yeah. So, you know, and they tell Frank this, and he was like, somebody was in the house? Like, okay, now we got to shut all this down. So they meet, and Rachel, you know, she has her little spice, her little flavor. And so she kind of tells him like, look, I don't want you all around here. I got a kid. Fletcher is her kid. And I believe he was 8 years old at the time. She's like, Fletcher shouldn't know you're here. I want everything to look normal. You know, you could just do a little bit of stuff, but everybody else will fill you in on that. Like just telling him his job. And I think that's the worst thing you could do to somebody. Like, how you gonna tell me how to do my job? This man has been protecting people for probably a long while, 10, 20 years. And he come in, he trying to save you, sis. You're the one that's one bullet away. And you're just like, oh no, it's all good. Like they'll fill you in on that. And yeah, okay, go on. He was like, oh, I think it's a mistake. I'm gonna get on out of here. And so they, Devaney goes after him and things like that. And he's like, she really just needs you. She's just scared and blah, blah, blah. He's like, fine, forget it. And so he shows him her bedroom. It wasn't her real bedroom that she sleeps in. It was like for a magazine cover. And Devaney reveals that that letter was found on the bed. And so Frank's antennas go up like somebody was in the house. We got to shut all of this down. This is ridiculous. So the next scene is he's doing all this like new construction. He's cutting down the trees of the property so he can see better. He puts up new cameras, all of these things. And Rachel just looks annoyed the whole time because she's like, man, I just want to relax. And like, you just been here doing all this construction. Have you ever had some construction that lasted a little bit too long? I have. Like you said, you was going to be done in 5 days. It's been 10. But, he was there and she's just annoyed. And then the next scene, she's chilling by the pool. She has her headphones on and she just gets annoyed by all the noise. And she makes a smoothie. And then that's where we meet her sister, Nikki, the hater of the movie, by the way. I think Nikki's actually worse than the killer. But anyway, we'll get to that. And she was like, he's through messing with my life bill. And they're like, why? And he's like, well, you know who couldn't get that past the gates? Robert Leach. And so I guess Frank told her she couldn't have brunch with her friends. And, just he was being really careful with her. And so she's overreacting. And then the next scene is they go shopping. And so this is their first, I think, real conversation, at least that we see, is that she's shopping for clothes and he's protecting her. And she's just talking that talk like, oh, so what's your life? Why are you so disciplined? And have you ever mixed business with pleasure? And I'm like, she had a crush on him and she was poking the bear a little bit. I think she was trying to see where she could go. And he's kind of being vulnerable, but not really. And I think the last line of the scene is, can you grab me that red jacket? And he was like, I'm here to keep you alive, not help you shop. And she gets so mad. And she comes out of the dressing room and snatches it in the end of scene. And their banter was just so cute. I thought it was very cute at first. Cat and mouse, when, who doesn't love a love story that starts off with a little bit of shade and disdain, right? So the next thing is he watches in his area where he lives at, I believe in the guest house or whatnot, he watches her video of Run to You. And it's a very beautiful video where her hair is flowing. She has on like a sheer dress or something. And she's getting her hair done and she watches him watching her. And so I think she's like, oh, I think he likes me. All right, let me see how far this can go. So they're flirting a little bit. But she goes to this club, and this is where I think the story really shifts. She goes to this club and she wants to perform her new song, Queen of the Night. And she has on that iconic Rachel Marin gear, the headpiece, the silver headpiece, the black leather with the silver skirt over it, and the black robe. By the way, I'm going to be her for Halloween one year as soon as I get a budget. And don't steal my idea. But so she goes to this club. And he's like, nobody told me about this. And he's very upset, but he has to go with it because they're already there. So she goes into her dressing room and she finds a note. And the note, is like, I think it's Rachel, you prepared to die. It's just all that bad stuff. And so here, speaking of this note, let me talk about this. Serial killers that are like gluing and cutting out letters from a magazine and pasting them strategically on a note, on notebook paper. Like, what's wrong with y'all? You have too much time in your hands. Like, can you just handwrite it? No, you were cutting out of magazines and you got a glue stick. You went to the store and you got a glue stick and you cut and pasted with the glue stick some words, and you really spelled out this this long letter about how you're going to kill her. So not only are you a killer, but you're good at arts and crafts too. Oh, Frank, you have something to do. You got to kill this dude. You got to kill him because he is good at arts and crafts and he's a killer. Like, wow, talk about multitasking, right? So she finds the letter and she's freaking out. And Devaney is like, they sent another one. She's like, what you mean another one? And everybody went on silent. And I'm like, here we go. Like, everybody on mute now. And Frank is like, they didn't tell you. Tell me what? And they're like, tell me what? She has to ask again. And, you know, Devaney's like, it was the same kind of thing, threats, things like that. And then he reveals, and somebody got into the house, and she freaks. Somebody was in my house when Fletcher was there. And then Cy, his old, oh God, he was annoying. He was such a hanger. Was he her publicist? I don't know, but he was annoying. He's like, oh no, Fletcher's fine. I mean, the house is like Fort Knox, right, Frank? And Frank is like, let's just get out of here. And so they really just want her to perform because Cy is like, this would be great for the video and all this stuff. But Frank's like, for her safety, she needs to go. I'm sure she was getting a hefty bag to perform that night. But it's like, do you want to die or do you want your cash? Okay. So they're like, let's just chill out or whatever. And then somebody busts through the door. And so she's like, he out there. And then Frank is like, maybe. And then Cy is like, we don't know that. And she's like, but you know he was in my house, Cy. And I'm like, he did. He ain't tell you, sis. Fire him. She didn't, but fire him. So anyway, they grab her to go out. And then ego kicks in, Rachel's ego. And so she's like, no freak is going to run me off stage. And he like, don't do this. Don't do this. So anyway, they cue up the song. She gets on the stage and she's doing her thing. You know, I'm the queen of the night. Yeah. And they knock her off the stage. She invites fans up. Well, no, did they jump up or did she invite them? I don't know, but somehow some fans got on stage. They knock her off because they're so expensive. I mean, they're so excited. And they start to crowd surf her. So then they start taking off all her stuff. And they probably gonna pawn it. I don't know. They taking off her jewelry and her headpiece and all this stuff off her dress. And Frank has to fight through the crowd to get to her. He wins, of course, because he's Frank, you know. He lifts her up. Oh, save the day. He carries her out, carries her back to the house, and tucks her in. And she asks the question, do you want to know why I act the way I act? And he was like, I know why. And then end of scene. Now the next scene is Tony, which was her other bodyguard. He was a bigger guy. Like Frank was slender, but he was like lethal. He was just an assassin. But Tony was just a bigger, like Italian guy. He looked strong, but he was like getting beat up. I'm sorry, especially at the end. We'll talk about that. Like, and Tony and Frank didn't get along because he thought he was there to step on his toes and things like that. And it's like, no, like I'm just here to assist and help keep this woman alive, right? If you thought you were so great, Devaney wouldn't have came and found me. So Frank comes over and they start fighting. Of course, Frank Farmer wins. And the last action is he shoots a knife right past Tony's head. And no words are ever spoken. But the last thing that's said from Frank is, I don't want to talk about this again. Mind you, Tony is beaten. Frank beat the hell out of him. His nose was bleeding. And he had a knife. He was like, all right, yep. I bow out gracefully. You got to bow out. Like, my man's is a killer. Like, he for real is a killer. So then the next scene here, we go off into, I guess this is the beginning of Act 2, where they become something more, right? Frank and Rachel end up getting together because Rachel, I think, had this thing of, wow, he's really nice man. She already had a crush on him, I believe, from the beginning of the movie, but it was something about him saving her life. And I think she had a little bit of, oh my God, could he be my one, my knight in shining armor and all that other thing or whatever? But she asked him out. And he should not have said yes, but he says yes, because he's attracted to her, of course. They go to some diner where they're boiling hot dogs. I'm like, dang, Frank, you could have took her to like, you know, somewhere. And she makes jokes like, this your kind of place? This your kind of food? This your kind of music? He was like, yeah, like it's low key. Yeah. Nothing but a bunch of hillbillies up in here. All right. But, you know, whatever. Now you're gonna take this R&B superstar to a place that boils hot dogs. Congratulations, that's what's up. So they end up dancing, shooting the breeze and, going back and forth, making jokes and things like that. And she asked him to dance. And so they danced to I Will Always Love You, the country version. And after that, they go back to Frank's house or his loft, whatever that was. And she finds out he played football. He was a safety, I think. No, defensive end. Yeah. She was like, "What are you, tough?" And he was like, "No, I was just fast." So then she flirts and seduces him, if you will, and they sleep together. Big mistake, Rachel. The next morning, Frank wakes up with an epiphany, like, "Oh, I should have slept with my client." No, Frank, you think? And so they get into it because he's like, "I shouldn't have done that. I crossed the line and you're my client." She's like, "Your client? So now you're not attracted to your client anymore?" And he was like, "No, I told you why, blah, blah, blah." Because he's so disciplined, but she got through, I think it's a thing of, I think they were both just fearful of love at the time, especially him. Because if you are an assassin or a Secret Service agent or like, I don't think a lot of things, vulnerability, I don't think works well for you in that line of work. And I think because she got to him, he had to just cut it all the way off. I can't do my job in protecting you and I'm sleeping with you because something like somebody could have came in that night and got her because, I'm vulnerable, right? We just slept together. So I get that. But he shouldn't have opened that door because now you just broke her heart and now she's going to go back to being a savage. And she did. So the next gig she has, she sings I Have Nothing at an event. Was it charity? I believe it was a charity event. And we meet Portman, who's from Frank's past. They were both Secret Service agents around the time Reagan was killed. And you could tell it's something there, like a tension a little bit. Portman even mentions like, still not over that, or you weren't even there. And I don't know if that was a dig or what have you, but Portman and Rachel sees this, and so she's trying to make Frank jealous. So she comes over there and starts flirting with Portman. They go into the bathroom, make out, and it's just a mess. And it's like, girl, you acting like a real schoolgirl. She gets drunk, and the next morning, Frank is having breakfast and she comes in with glasses on because she's hungover, of course, right? And so she's like, "I bet you didn't have I bet you've never had a heavy night in your whole damn disciplined life." And he's laughing in her face. And she's like, "Don't you laugh at me. Don't you dare judge me." And she's like, "Man, I ain't tell you to sleep with everybody in the party. Stop playing with me." And so she storms out. So that tension is now affecting their working relationship because they crossed the line. You should never, what is it? You don't ish where you sleep, whatever you call it. I don't know. But don't do that. Don't ever date coworkers. And it never works out, especially when it's something like this serious, because that can go really wrong. So the next thing happens is that she's at a hotel and she's missing. And Frank is like freaking out and all this, and Tony's gone too. So she comes back late, like he goes and tries to check everywhere and he's freaking out. She comes back and she was like, "Oh, I went out and did a little shopping." And he was like, "One more time and I'm gone." And she's like, "You remember, you work here, you work for me, blah, blah, blah." So he goes downstairs and he's like checking something. And then he ends up getting into a fight with another guy in the kitchen. Like, how are you going to fight the chef? He did pop off. His mouth was slick. He said something like, he called Frank an a-hole or something like that. But like Frank just like beat him up. And that's the thing. Now your vulnerability is costing you to be emotional. And now you're not thinking rational and you just beat up some man. He could have sued you and Rachel. He didn't. But if it was my movie, I would have been like, now this is gonna come back to haunt you. And now he's gonna sue you for everything. So next scene, we see that Rachel is in her bedroom and she gets a phone call. And some creepy guy, she thought it was Fletcher, calling, and it wasn't. It was the stalker. And so he's like, no, no, he sounds really crazy. And so she was freaked out. And so she goes out on the lanai on the balcony and smokes her cigarette. And Frank comes out there, and I think he was planning on quitting. And he was gonna go out to the balcony, and he sees her there, and she's like, please, kind of begging him, like, please come back to work. I'm sorry, this happened. I didn't mean it. She was like, I hate my fear, all of that. And so he's like, okay, the only way I'll come back, you give Tony a vacation, Devania a vacation, and no more sighs. So she's like, fine. And then he said he wanted to take her away somewhere in a secluded location. And so she's like, fine, no more concert dates. Like, he shut it all down. She's like, fine, fine. And so he promised her, he was like, if you screw me this time, I'll kill you myself. So, all right now. So he takes her up to the North Pole. I really don't know if that was, I don't know where they were, I forgot, but it was cold up in there. They had coats. It was snow. They was in a cabin somewhere. They looked like they didn't have electricity. It was it was the sticks, honey. So they go there, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like, you got an R&B superstar in the sticks. So they go there, and we meet Frank's dad, right? Mr. Farmer, I think that was his name. I forgot, but Mr. Farmer. And so Mr. Farmer's there. He has a talk with Rachel about Frank, and asking like what kind of work does she do and things like that. And he reveals something about Frank, that he came up to that cabin to spend a year after the Reagan thing. And so she said, the Reagan thing, and he was like, he wasn't there when Reagan got shot. He's never gotten over it. So I was like, ooh, that's the trauma. That's the guilt he's carrying around. So he has this thing. That's why I believe discipline is so imperative for him, especially as a bodyguard. Like, if I'm not there, my subject could die, and then what do I do, right? So then they have dinner, and they're laughing and joking and all of that. Rachel goes to bed, and Frank walks her up there. And Nikki has this little jealous look in her eye. And I'm like, Nikki, when did you start liking Frank? Huh, sis? I mean, everything your sister has, you want too. Okay, that's who we are, of course. So she comes downstairs. I think she had a little bit of liquor in her system. And she starts trying to kiss on Frank and stuff. And he's like, you're a beautiful woman, but he rejects her. And so she's like, but you don't want me. But you didn't say no to the boss. I'm like, oh gosh. All right, Nikki. She goes upstairs, and Frank is like, Lord, women. I'm like, why me? Like, is he just the hottest bodyguard? He got 2 women on him? So the next day, they're in the boat again. Fletcher, I believe, is in the boat the next day alone. And Frank runs out to save him. And, Rachel's freaking out, like, he can't swim, it's cold, and it could have been bad. And then the boat blows up, and it's like, wow, this killer is here, y'all. And they was like, who could have known you was here? And he was like, I don't know. This place has nothing to do with her. And his dad says, maybe it's got something to do with you. And I was like, who wants Frankie dead? So they start to pack up their things, because they're like, this place is no longer safe now. Somebody cut the phone lines. It's like crazy, man. And then later on that evening, Frank is drinking, I believe, and he hears something, and lo and behold, it's Nikki. Nikki comes downstairs. No, I'm sorry. Nikki is already in the kitchen drunk. And Frank is like, I don't know if he just had that intuition or something, but he just looked like he already knew something. And he grabs the bottle, and she was like, you think he come again? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, what question did he ask her? And he was like, you can call it on. She was like, he's gonna come again. She was like, again and again. And she was like, yeah. And she started crying. And he's like, you can call it off. And she was like, I would never hurt the baby. I would never hurt Fletcher. And so he's like, you can call it off. What's going on? Like, and he was like, tell me the name. Who did you hire? Blah, blah, blah. And so she was like, I don't know who's writing the letters, you know, because he was trying to tie it back to the letters, but they're reading my thoughts. I hate her. Girl, you hate your own sister? She took your dream of being a singer? Okay. We heard the duet of Jesus Love You, and Whitney washed you, honey. You weren't going to be a star. So you're like, I hate her. I hate her. She has everything and I have nothing, blah, blah, blah. Okay, girl. And so she asked the question kind of similar to what Rachel asked, like, you want to know why I did it? And he was like, you already told me. She has everything and you have nothing. Disgusting. So then she says something and then a noise is heard. And Frank's like, just chill out. He go gets his gun and he checks everybody upstairs or whatever. The killer gets in the house. I don't know how you get into this cabin because I thought you would have had it locked up or whatever, but he gets in there and pow! He shoots Nikki right in the belly. Oh, well. Did anybody care? Raise your hand if you cared. I didn't care one way. Somebody had to go. Nikki was a hater. So guess what you get for being a hater? A bullet in your belly. Sorry, sis. And, Frank goes out to try to chase the killer. He's he's doing shutting his eyes and shooting at the trees and stuff. And the guy gets in the car. He's long gone. And so he hops on the phone and calls his guys. And he's like, somebody was here last night. And they was like, oh, no, we got the guy. The guy he's got a crazy obsession with her. He's got this crazy room with all her pictures and all this stuff. And he was like, that ain't him that was here. This guy was a professional. He's a killer. And so they was like, how long do you need? He was like, give me 48 hours, whatever. So the repast comes, the funeral. We got to bury Nikki. And Whitney's crying, Rachel's crying. And I'm like, what I didn't like about this is one of the critiques I have. No one ever told Rachel the truth, that her sister tried to have her killed out of jealousy. So she's, still thinking that her sister got killed because of her. Imagine that guilt, I think Frank should have told her the truth, like, your sister put a hit out on you, sis. And whatever happened, the killer, because she gave it up. She gave the name of Armando, whoever that was. She gave up the name, and that's why she got shot. She got killed. So I just think somebody should have told Rachel, like, girl, your sister was not loyal. She tried to kill you. May she rest in peace, though. We still gonna eat the chicken at the repast, but she's, she wasn't loyal, and, you die. So they're mourning her, and so now they're back in LA, I believe, and her and Frank are talking, and she asked him the real, because she knows Frank is going to keep it real with her, and she was like, it's not over yet. He's like, nope, he'll come again. Yep. At the Oscars? Maybe, probably, sure. And Frank is trying to convince her, don't go. I don't want you to die, period. Right? Not only do I think at this time he really loves her and cares about her, he can't admit it, but I don't want you to die. You are my client, but I do love you. And so she's like, look, I've been waiting for this moment since I was a little kid. And I feel her on that. Like, would y'all have went? Would y'all have went? Like, if a killer was on the loose and he wanted you dead, and he was probably going to do it at the Oscars to make it look like this grand old crazy event, right? To go down in history, to kill someone at the Oscars, which is crazy. Would you have gone? You had this dream since you were a little kid. You sing, you act, you dance, whatever it is that you do. you've had this dream of getting that gold statue, and it's probably yours because that was your year, honey. That was your year. Would you have still gone? Yes, I say yes. Because nobody's going to get into the way of me getting my gold statue, period. I'm going to have my bodyguard, my other bodyguard. I want 10 henchmen, the Navy, the Army, the SEALs. I want everybody. But I'm getting my gold statue. So I get where she was coming from. It's like, look, I've dreamt of this since I was a little kid. You got to let me go. And he says, no, it's still too dangerous. And she said, I'm going to be all right because you're going to be there to protect me. And it's all lovey-dovey and they kiss or whatever. So the next scene is they pulling up to the Oscars and everybody's on edge. Rachel's the only one trying to laugh and make a little jokey joke, you know, but everybody's on edge because they're like, man, she might die tonight, y'all. That's a nice gold dress, but if it's get blood on it, oh my goodness. So she goes to the Oscars and she goes in the back and Frank gives her a, what do you call it? Like a little pin, but it has a button in it to push if she's in trouble. So she's like, oh, it's beautiful. Thank you. And he's like, yeah, it's beautiful. But if you push this, I'll be right there, you know. So she goes out to present with another gentleman. And because of, you know, Frank is like, stay alert, stay, you know, do not let your guard down, something, she freaks out on stage. Sis was perspiring. She was sweating in that gold dress, honey. That Bob was sweating. I know she was hot. Because you could just, every time it panned to her face, she couldn't even read the teleprompter right. She was like, now let's see who the winner is. Like, he scared her. He put all this fear in her. And I know what she's saying, like, because she ends up running off stage and freaking out, thinking that she sees on the teleprompter. I'm sorry, not on the teleprompter, in the note, when the gentleman, when her co-presenter opens the note of the winner, she thinks she sees Rachel, blah, blah, blah. What's happening is a hallucination because she's so fearful because Frank has got her on 10. So she goes in the back and she goes off on Frank. I'm like, man, they have had 19 arguments in this whole movie. And so she's like, you know, everybody saw me up there sweating. I'm like a raging lunatic and all of this because Frank has got me scared as hell and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, look, he here. And we see Portman later on. So here's the thing, right? So Rachel's like, forget this. I'm about to go to my seat, get ready for my award. And so Frank is like, all right. And she's like, is he coming? And then he ends up whispering to Tony that he's here. I know who the killer is. It's Portman. Portman from back in the day, who was at the party that Rachel was about to sleep with, but she stopped it. He's here, and he's the killer. And so he was like, what, for real? And, you know, she's like, is anybody coming? So they break up or whatever. So Frank is still backstage. Tony's backstage. And her category comes up for Best Actress, right? So she's about to win. And he sees Portman with a camera, but the camera has a laser, you know, on it to shoot. And so, but they've already taken, he can't even tell Tony because they've already taken his mic backstage because it was interfering with the other audio equipment. So Frank's like, oh my God, how am I going to tell Tony? So Tony taps Portman, not knowing that it's Portman, because Portman is, you know, his back is to Tony. He was like, hey, you got to get out of here. And he like gouges his eye out. Like, that's what I mean. Tony is this big guy, right? Like Tony's like 350, solid. He can't fight. Frank beat him up. Portman beat him up. Like, girl, fire him. As soon as this whole debacle is over, fire Tony. He cannot be a bodyguard getting beat up, and he 350. Just saying. So Frank is like, okay, he's watching everything. He sees the laser. So they call Rachel, and the winner is Rachel Marin. And she's like, yes, God. You know, she comes up stage in slow motion, and the light is swaying, and Portman shoots, but Frank gets out there just in time, and Frank gets shot right there in the shoulder area. And Rachel's like, "Oh my God, what's happening?" And it's all mayhem. Of course, everybody's freaking out and screaming and stuff. But Frank, before he passes out, finds, has his gun, and he sees Portman, because Portman is about to shoot Rachel again. And he gives him two. He shoots two up in him, and he kills him. We all applauded. We did. And then Frank passes out right on cue because he's shot. So in the meantime, Rachel's like, "Stay awake, don't die, don't die." We don't know what happened, it kind of leaves us on a cliffhanger. I kind of knew, even as a little kid, like, they're not going to kill Frank Farmer. Like, that's not fair, right? I think it was just a shoulder. It was just a shoulder. So the next scene is the final scene, the "I will always love you" plane scene that we adore, right? Frank shows up with the cast, and he recommended an old man as the new bodyguard, right? And Rachel, of course, being Rachel, makes a joke and says, Frank is like, "How's the new guy?" And so she's like, "He has gray hair, Frank." It's like, that's a Whitney line. Like, that's not Rachel. That's a Whitney line. Like, "He got gray hair. Like, what you want me to say?" And he's like, "He's really good." She's like, "Yeah, but did you have to give me an old man? Like, is that a hearing aid? I don't." So anyway, she was like, "You got to show business." He was like, "Yeah, I'm done. Like, I ain't get shot with rape. When I was protecting the president and such, I never got shot. I get shot with you, I'm gone, sis." So they kiss, and well, not here. He just kind of kissed her on the cheek at the time, and it's like, "Bye, Rachel. Nobody ever says I love you, whatever, but we know you do." So Whitney, Rachel gets back into the plane, and she stops the plane from taking off so she can get a good kiss with Frankie Farmer. And I think it's such a beautiful shot of the camera going around as they're kissing. It's just so beautiful, and "I Will Always Love You" is playing under, of course. And Frank, the last scene is we see him back he's protecting somebody, a high official at the governor's ball or something like that. So he's back on the job, months later. So love wins, I guess. I don't know. I kind of wanted them to be together, but in real life they can't be, because his lifestyle it just doesn't match. You have a superstar, a bodyguard. That won't, it was just a time period in their lives that they needed each other. He saved her life, and they killed the threat, and all is well. Now, I will say that this is my favorite movie. It is not the best acted. I know a lot of people are like, "I mean, you act and you do all this stuff, and you love movies and things. Why is The Bodyguard? It's not the best acted movie." And it's not, but it's my favorite because who doesn't love a good love story? The best soundtrack of all time. And I think there's something to be said about, that was the first time I saw an interracial couple on screen, and no one ever mentioned race. It was just two people living their lives, right? One was a superstar. I think it was more about class than anything, a superstar bodyguard type of thing. I thought it had a good conflict of this stalker. To some people, they say that Whitney didn't, she didn't have to do much acting because she was playing herself. I disagree, because in her words, if you tell Whitney that somebody's coming after her to kill her, you only got to tell her once. She ain't getting on no stage. She's gone. Please believe it. But I do think there was some acting involved. She had to act out those, those scenes. I don't think she was Whitney. That's just my opinion. And I'll say specifically of getting the club scene. I think that was her most vulnerable, because she was literally, doing her thing, and she had to get knocked off and literally scream and fight for her life type of thing. And then she showed real vulnerability, I think, in the next scene of like, "Do you want to know why I act the way I act?" I think it was all rooted in insecurity. Yes, she's this huge pop star diva, but she still has a little bit of insecurity. She's still a little girl inside. So that's why I loved it. And I liked the twist of her sister being a rat. And, even though let me read Nikki. Can I read, Nikki? All right. Nikki Marin. Rachel stole nothing from you. You were never going to be a star. How dare you try to kill Rachel Marin? She had a child. She had a career, millions of fans. And out of jealousy and hate, she got you a job. You were her assistant. She was paying you. It wasn't like she left you in the hood somewhere picking out of the garbage can. She brought you along. You're her assistant. She was paying you. You were living in a nice house as well. And that wasn't good enough. She has everything. You have nothing. So you put a hit out on her? How dare you? You're disgusting. So yes, we cheered when you got shot and killed. Sorry, sis. To the actress that played her, you did a marvelous job. Michelle Richards, I'm sure you're not like that at all. But honey, Nikki, so you got one in the belly. Boom. But I love this movie. It did well in the box office. It was the jumpstart to Whitney's acting career. She goes on to do Wait to Exhale and then The Preacher's Wife, which she kills, of course. But I loved it. It's a good love story, has a good conflict, a good twist. If you've never seen it, I implore you to go see it. It was in the theaters for its 30th anniversary, but it's on, I'm sure you can find it online or DVD. If you don't know what a DVD is, sorry, I'm old. But I implore you to watch it. It's a really good film, and it's my favorite. So drop down in the comments below. Let me know what you liked about the film, what you didn't like about the film, and what you want me to review next for Throwback Thursday. Till next time, bye.